morning and welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zanzere Ndebele and this is the Breakfast Club, the program where we talk about current affairs, politics and issues that are happening in our communities. And today in our program, we want to look at MPs. What is it that the MPs promised us in 2018? The past few days we have been talking about councillors and playing interviews that were done with councillors in 2018, talking about service delivery, talking about investment in the city, and most of them have really not done much in terms of what they promised. And also we had an opportunity back then in 2018 to talk to a few ministers, not really ministers, but members of parliament, and they were telling us what's happening in parliament, what they expected to do, the kind of laws that they hoped to push through parliament. But we know some of these MPs were recalled before they could do much and went back to parliament. And it's just the past 5 years have been just, for the opposition mainly, it has been, I don't know whether to call confusing or serious confusion. Nothing much happened because of the fight that happened in the MDC, and Monzora ended up with the MDC, and a new organization, CCC, was formed, and up to now, some of us, we don't even know which MP belongs to which political party. And we hope that the coming elections, things will be much clearer. And today in the program, we are talking to the MP of Nkulumane, Kucaca Phulu. Kucaca was recalled. He's one of the MPs who were recalled, but also voted back into parliament last year in March. And we are not quite sure yet whether he will be recontesting again for the position of being an MP of Nkulumane. We hope that in the next few weeks or months, just before the general elections, we'll manage to talk to him and hear what he has to say about his term in parliament and whether he will be contesting again for the position of the MP for Nkulumane. But for today, let's hear what he had to say back then. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
The last time we were having a program, you were actually campaigning, and eventually you won. So, I mean, let's start there. What was your experience in terms of, campaigning? This was the first time you were actually running a political campaign. How was it?
It's amazing that I'm actually sitting here, having won the election. Because, winning an election is not something you take for granted. You go to people in order to ask them to have confidence in you. And you really don't know whether they're going to say, we think you can represent us. And I'm happy that they thought I could represent them. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about the people asking you to represent them, and I'm happy about it. There's no magic that I did. They didn't elect me because of anything I did. Really, I didn't do anything amazing, except that they thought that I had the attributes that they need for somebody to represent.
So now you are in parliament, it's almost like 6 months or so. What was your impression the first day you walked in parliament, for a session?
I've always had an interest in parliament from the outside, but when you walk in, it's a bit different. I'll tell you. Firstly, in the sense that I thought that being a lawyer, operating in the courts and everything, I thought that people would be more, I don't want to use the word serious, more engaged, solemnly engaged with the business of legislating. But, there are a lot of light-hearted moments. You get to laugh, you get to raise issues and do serious deliberations. You get also to observe people, not taking parliament seriously at certain intervals. So it's a mix. But you are there for the whole week and for 5 years. So certainly there's no way that people can be solemnly engaged for 5 years.
Yeah, you've mentioned something that is important, that you are there for the whole week, for 5 years. But we get to see what is happening in parliament just once a week, where it's live streamed by ZBC or it's on radio, which is usually the question and answer with the ministers. And that session does not really give us a good impression because the people are always heckling at each other. And so is that heckling that we hear and see on TV, is that what happens every day for 5 days, for 5 years?
Yes. This weekend, actually, I had a committee workshop where I learned something new. It was put this way. There is Parliament in display. That is the Parliament that you see on Wednesday when there's television, when we're in the chamber doing budget, and there's Parliament at work, and that is in committees. So Parliament at work and Parliament in display are two different things. In committees, it's serious business, it's technical, there's minute detail, there are targets that you need to meet, and you need to make things work. But on Wednesdays, normally Wednesday is question and answer. So, and people, when people know that there's a camera, especially people who, the camera is a new thing, it's possible for you to get theatrics. But at the same time, sometimes what is interpreted as theatrics is people really making a serious point. To say, we have this point to make, and how you communicate a point can be in terms of an intricate, detailed argument, or you can communicate a point by demonstrating it. If you're unhappy with something that Minister X has done, you can demonstrate that by vociferously, voicing that you're unhappy. It looks like mayhem to someone who's watching on camera. But sometimes the point is made, and then normally discussions will tie the issue that is the point down, and it will proceed. So people in Parliament work very hard, and they're productive, they produce a lot. A better way to get a good idea of what is happening in Parliament is actually through reading the Hansard. I brought a pile of books from my constituency. I'll give you the Hansard, for example, for the budget, because then you will see what they're doing and what they are resolving.
So there is that question and answer session with the ministers mostly.
Yeah.
Do you give these guys the questions in advance, or those questions are just asked there randomly when the minister is there?
So on Wednesday is the day for questions, and answers. So all ministers are supposed to be there, unless they've excused themselves. And anyone who has a question will ask the minister a question. Now, there are oral questions. Then you have written questions. So it's divided into two groups of questions. The oral questions can be asked there and then, and you get your answer immediately. Normally, an oral question is not about a specific issue. I cannot ask the Minister of Education about the science lab at Mandwandwe in the question and answer, in the oral question and answer. Because, when is he going to research? How is he going to magically know what's happening with the science lab at Mandwandwe? So that kind of question, if it's specific, you have to put it in writing. It will appear on the order paper, and on the appointed day, the minister will have researched and will give you an answer. But if it's a question on policy, what is the government policy on people over 70 years paying fees at a hospital? It's something the Minister of Health can answer there and then, because he knows the government policy. So those are the kind of questions you can ask in that question and answer.
So you as a member of the opposition, there are not that many,
Yes.
ZANU-PF is majority. How is the business there? How easy is it to get your points, listened by the other?
We use a whipping system. And normally, major issues will be decided along party lines, in the sense that the minister who introduces a bill comes from a party, and they will have discussed the issues. And when it comes to Parliament, there is hardly ever a lot of debate from the party from which the minister hails. But this is the beauty of having an opposition, because then the opposition can raise issues. They may not win in a vote. If the House is divided, obviously the ruling party will win. But they can raise important questions that the House can debate. And sometimes, even though we have this party line, sometimes members of Parliament really engage on issues. Like you saw on the 20th during the budget, there are a number of questions that I did raise, which the minister accepted to say, no, look, we accept that what you're saying makes sense. And we accept your suggested amendment. It happened on numerous occasions because we were interacting and trying to get an answer. But it does not follow that it will happen with every bill. And so it depends on the issues, really.
Yeah, you are talking about the budget which was being discussed, and one of the issues that was discussed, in which we, unfortunately, like I said, we only get to see Parliament once a week, was the issue which was raised by Temba on the issues of MPs' welfare, which many people thought MPs are calling for, you know, a V8, three-course meal, and all those kind of things. Yes. I mean, let's move away from that and say, how is the welfare of an MP? You are a lawyer, you're a professional lawyer, you've been practicing, and lawyers, we see them driving Mercedes-Benz and living, you know, at Benside and all those kind of things, the Selborne Park, and now you're an MP.
Yes.
I mean, has that changed? Your lifestyle, has it changed?
I'm sure as a public servant, your lifestyle will change. Firstly, in that Parliament in practice is not part-time, it's full-time. Let me describe my week for you. On Sunday, I will normally drive down to Harare so that I'm in Harare for Sunday evening. Because on Monday, I have a committee. I'm a member of the Committee on Information Communication Technology and Courier Services. It sits on Monday. And normally, a lot of people have committees on Monday. On Tuesday, you have committees in the morning, and Parliament will sit actually at 2 o'clock. On Wednesday, there's question and answer. Thursday, Parliament will sit. Friday, you may have committees. This weekend, for example, I had a workshop, which ended on Sunday. So that's your whole week. You are engaged in parliamentary issues. So if you have the kind of job that requires you to be present, like being a lawyer, you know, I have to be in my office. I have to receive letters. It's a disservice to your clients if you're not around. You are unable to do your job. So in my case, I had to quit my job, and I had to do my job in a new format as an advocate because it's more flexible, and I had to open an office in Harare so that when I'm not sitting in Parliament, I can quickly go to my office and get some work done. So basically, then it means you rely solely on this salary that Parliament is giving you, and whatever other business you have. When it comes to transport, I know that MPs have always, you know, gotten these cars that everybody is talking about. I don't know what the difference is this time, but of course we're going through a difficult period. The economy is not doing well, and one supports the idea that you can't be seen to be calling for extravagant things. But certainly, one needs a car to move to and fro. Like I told you, I drive very often. I drive at night, in the morning, different times of the day. And sometimes when you are wanted back in the constituency, you have to drive again. And you need a strong vehicle to be able to do all those things, and also to reach out to your constituency, and so forth. When Temba mentioned, well, when he talked about, he mentioned the V8 and three-course meal. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the chamber. If you go and review the videos, I was outside because I'm in the Parliamentary Legal Committee. And so before people can go and debate some of these bills that will be presented by the Minister of Finance, we have to go through them. And budget is an emergency situation. So it means the committee is sitting also as Parliament is going ahead to negotiate a few things. So by the time you see them debating, you see us debating things in the House, we'll have had debates also in the committees. So I remember I was with the Minister of Finance outside, and the Minister of Justice outside at some point. But according to my understanding, because I then read the Hansard and I review the videos, the debate was not about cars. The debate was actually about the globular budget of Parliament. Because there's no way that during a budget you will get to debate about cars. But you debate the entire budget. And the point that was being made was that Parliament is the third arm of government. it's part of the matrix of government. And for a long time, it has been underfunded. If you compare with the executive, you compare with the judiciary, and even if you compare with individual ministries. So for Parliament to work effectively, they need their budget. There's so much that we're doing as members of Parliament, we're doing without. Not in terms of welfare, but in terms of actually doing our job. He gave an example of the maintenance of the building itself. You can see the JSC is building quads everywhere. They're doing well. Parliament also needs to put their house in order so that an MP can be able to discharge his duties properly. And so this is what he was mentioning. I'm sure that the V8 and the three-course meal were mentioned merely by way of example, by way of reference. And the minister would have gotten the point that was being made. I don't think the minister really said, wow, I really need to start thinking about a three-course meal for members of Parliament. And I'm glad that our system would not allow for that kind of arbitrariness. So I think it's a matter of communication, and people communicate in different ways. I'm sure if it was me or somebody else, we may have put the issue using a different way. Because that's how I see it.
So you mentioned that you are in the Committee Information, Communication and Courier Services. I mean, these committees, how effective are they? Do you really get to hold the minister to account? Do you influence policy?
So the committee is supposed to. So if I remember, I've been in Parliament for this short period of time, and the first major issue that we've had to deal with is obviously the budget, and the role of the committee is to invite the minister to show us what he is proposing as a budget. We look at his budget and we say whether it's adequate, it's inadequate. And the minister will make his presentation to us, and we will look at it and we will discuss it for some time. So I actually did meet Minister Kazembe over that budget. And we will actually argue the case for the ministry to say, no, we think this ministry really needs more than what you've allocated for them. Because we're saying this ministry is not the personal property of the minister or the president. It's really there to benefit the people. So we look at the needs of the people vis-a-vis information technology and courier services, and then we help each other. So to that extent, the committees are effective. But after the budget is passed, we have an interest in ensuring that there is correct expenditure of the budget, that there's no underspending, but also there's no overspending. And so that we don't have to end up having supplementary budgets, borrowing, and so forth. So we supervise that. But we also look at policy of the ministry, policy issues. When you invite them, they do come. They're gracious enough to come and explain policy, and we engage. We make recommendations, and those recommendations are taken on board. Sometimes they are not. Then you take further remedial action. Sometimes there's need for further legislation in the area, and if that is recommended, then that's how supposedly legislation is also supposed to come. So the committees are key in that regard.
Yeah, I think you've explained well, so now an ordinary person knows what a committee does and how Parliament actually functions, because sometimes we just get this image that they just go, they make noise, come back, get cars. I mean, now let's talk about, you're an MP, you're in Harare 4 times a week, and sometimes 5 or 6. But you still have a constituency that you have to please and interact. How do you then juggle the time?
I think you have to be innovative in terms of how you can address the concerns of constituents. And technology does help. Well, these days, a lot of people can get in touch with you to tell you about different issues that they're having, and you can actually be able to address them that way. But sometimes it requires you to come down to address issues. And so you must create a day or two when you're able to be in the constituency. That's why I'm here on Monday today, because my committee is not sitting this Monday for different reasons, and so I have to be here. Ideally, which goes back to the issue of the budget, I should have a constituency office. And I always tell people, Zenzele, that An office is not a building or a space that you occupy. That's simply a building. When you have an office, you have to populate it with people who know how to do their job. And so it means you have to be able to pay for the space, you have to be able to pay somebody who works there, who receives information on your behalf, who disseminates information on your behalf, and who sets appointments, basically runs your diary in the constituency. Now, as a lawyer, I find it very difficult, because if I try to pay from out of my pocket, let me tell you what will happen. I suppose I could pay the rent from out of my pocket. But to pay an individual is difficult, because we'll be sitting here, next year, and you will be interviewing me about a labor case where I've not paid someone in terms of the minimum, wages, or in terms of the recommended tariffs for the industry and so forth. So we have to avoid that. It is proper that such a function be properly budgeted for, so that I know, because when I employ you, I have to be able to pay you for 12 months or for the whole 5 years. So there's consistency. But certainly, I'm working on an office. I've applied to the council for an office. Meanwhile, I'm using Councillor Jenner's office to consult. He has been kind enough to allow me to see people there from time to time. But ideally, I should have my own.
So
but also, I go into the ground over weekends. I visit people. They tell me, "Lapana vule problem, lapana vule challenge." I also go to funerals. Attending funerals is a very important thing that an MP can do, because you go and you are with the people in your constituency during their time of grief. That's important. But I've also learned, as I attended these funerals, that it's also a meeting point for people in the constituency, and you get to pick a lot of problems that are happening in the constituency. At one funeral, I went there and I found that the family was having a challenge with an issue, relating to how their family member died, and I was able to assist. At another funeral, I was able to go there and I was able to hear about a problem some other person was having. So just generally be a mix and mingle with people in the constituency. I try to have a feedback meeting because we get a break from Parliament between December and and early January. That's a good time to be in the constituency as well. And it's a good time to hold your feedback meetings. And I had planned mine. I'm sure you saw my poster, but we all know what happened. It became impossible to hold it. So I'm planning to hold one very soon. I need to find a Sunday where I can hold a feedback meeting. But I was lucky enough to still be able to meet my constituency, because I decided then to facilitate donations for the elderly, orphans, the orphaned, because we have orphanages in Nkulumane, the disabled, and other people that are in need. And I worked through a local company, which is a constituency in Nkulumane, United Refineries, and other business persons from within the constituency. You saw the pictures with Modi and Moyo from United Refineries, and I was still able to meet people that way.
Yeah, just taking you back to the office. So currently, there is no budget in terms of Parliament budget, and that actually allows MPs to have a constituency office that is manned by someone so that they can give feedback.
Well, I think this budget has addressed that. The budget has addressed that. We're just waiting to see how they're going to roll it out so that we can become effective as soon as possible.
There's also the question of the Constituency Development Fund, which has been budgeted for, maybe have not been received. I mean, what's your intention with this fund?
The Constituency Fund is going well. We actually had a meeting last week where they were briefing us, and it will be disbursed soon. And I've been able to open an account to administer this fund. I've been able to pick a few people to be, on the committee. I'm still waiting for for names to be submitted by others, in order to fully constitute that committee with, in a way that it is workable. And in that committee, it's not just myself, as the Member of Parliament in the House of Assembly from Nkulumane. We will also have some senators and the MPs from the PR who will also join us. And once we sit like that, we will then decide on projects that will have impact on the people of Nkulumane. I'll give you an example. Look at the gardens. There's this urban agriculture initiative that council has been rolling out. And I think it's a very good initiative that council has rolled out. And I would recommend that in coming up with a project, because I'm not a person with a huge ego, so I don't necessarily want a project with my name on it. I must, as a starting point, refer to existing projects and see where they lack and then improve them. So if these ladies have these ladies and gentlemen have a garden, they feed a lot of people from within that area. They feed their families. Sometimes they have 40, 100 families. They feed those families. They can sell their produce. But sometimes we find that these people are elderly and they have to use buckets to water from the tap. So if we could equip them with a pump, a Jojo tank, and a tap that is actually centrally located so that they humble up and down. So I went, I've had some consultations with them. You'd have seen some pictures on my Facebook. Those were consultations to see what our requirements are going. I've had a fence to keep stray dogs out, to keep children out, and so forth and so forth. So we could do something with that. This time, ECDF, I think we'll be getting it annually. So it means if I address someone who isn't got this year, which would be next year, I can address some vendors. The next year, I can address Iskolo. The next year, I can address yet another constituency. So I think there are exciting times ahead in terms of that.
Lastly, what are the expectations of, how do you manage the expectations? Because I've noticed that people see an MP as someone who's supposed to provide a donor, so to speak, rather than a legislator. How do you manage the expectations in your constituency?
Well, indeed, it's true that people have that understanding sometimes. But people need help. And sometimes I'm very happy if the person they can think of is me, because then it means I'm relevant. But what I do is I then evaluate the challenge, the problem, and most of the times I can help by referring them to the appropriate institutions that can help. So if it's a legal problem, I know where to refer them, because my training allows me to know what will legal aid, my organizations which help. If it's fees, I can reach out to institutions that are able to help. If they're able to help, they do help. And there's quite a number of people who've been assisted in that regard. And sometimes where I can personally assist, if it's within my realm of competence and ability, I do try and assist. And I've had some success stories in that regard.
So what are the 2-3 top issues that you want to address in the next 5 years in your constituency?
Oh, I thought you were going to say in Parliament.
Or even in Parliament, it's still okay, yeah. Not necessarily.
No, look, obviously, because I see a link between the needs of my constituency and what I do in Parliament. The first one is, obviously, we need to sort out the economy, because people are suffering. Amafezi emchova ebengasekho affordable. Ezitolo bekungasathengeki, ezikolo kungasahambeki. Abantu abala misebenzi. So we think that if we can contribute to governance in such a way that we see people getting employed, the economy turning around, but even in the governance, the rule of law, siyakwazi ukunqawungela rule of law yabona abantu bekazwa ngamasotsha you know emalokishini la everywhere really abantu bekazwa ngamasotsha. I mean it's distressing. And when we ask questions in Parliament, I'm really disappointed by some of the answers we get from the ministers, particularly the Minister of Justice, for instance. When we asked him, is it policy of government? I'm asking you about brutalized or when the answer that you give me as minister to say no, what about abantu Tile? Of course, that's abantu Tile, we don't think it's ideal with abantu Tile. But about dynamics maneng, abantu be manipulator would buy a loot. Siyakwazi ukuthi asibe bathi beqhuma ngama-bolt card ukuthi baze buy a loot. But anyway, Minister, we can talk about abantu abaluthileyo. We can talk about abantu abaleli police. Right now, I'm asking you about amasotsha achaya abantu. Answer that question about amasotsha achaya abantu. That's the one we want to know. Then singaqeda, we'll ask you about uluta. We'll ask you about abantu abaleli police. But every time you ask them about abantu abachaya ngamasotsha, they deflect to abantu abaluthileyo. They deflect to criminals. They deflect to NGOs. They deflect to foreign funding. Abantu abachayiweyo. And I think that is directly applicable to my constituency. Ngoba abantu brutalize you, they ask every day, would be as one in the I mean, the worst thing you can do, Zenzele, is that is to brutalize. I saw a video, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen it, it's going around, of a mother who bahlaliswe phansi ngamapolisa uchawa ngaphansi kwenyawo umntwana lo. Sekukhulile is about 14, 15, 16. Until umama wajabela phezu komntana. How do you brutalize a child phambi kukanina? How cruel is that? It's the most cruel thing. How, you know, some of the allegations we are hearing are terrible, and I think we need to get to the bottom of some of these things. Our society can't continue as if these things never happened. And so that is my role in Parliament, to make sure we, as a society, we get to the bottom of some of these things and return to normalcy. So, what we saw Jonathan. You know, but
yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
And I'm one of those people who have been opposing Jonathan at every level. I mean, in every way you can, including challenge against Jonathan. But at least the regime about Jonathan in the later parts, one keep people and left Jonathan used law to make his point. Even to oppress you, he used law. He used governance. He used statecraft. And he took advantage of craft literacy, lama jingles. But what about laba bachava today? About a pie and all sorts of things. And ama violations are beyond what we even saw. Excluding episode where I just was really a common denominator between this regime and Nkulumane. So I'm saying what we're seeing is really disconcerting. And we ought to be very, very worried about our future. You know, and sometimes I worry, I think you see abantu who take it lightly and are not worried enough about the brutalization of abantu. But certainly, Tina, SRS Pila on the ground, Lati sing abantu. Brutalized. We are very worried about it and we think it should end.
Do you think in Parliament there is a committee that can actually look at this issue and come up with recommendations?
Certainly, firstly, for starters, the Human Rights Commission, which came up with a report, and would like to commend them for doing their job and coming up with that interim report. I'm sure it's a short, sharp report. But you saw the backlash by the minister. And you know, we don't want our independent commissions to be muzzled. They should be allowed to do their job. When a commission national healing, one of their mandates is to facilitate conciliation between individuals, political parties, you know, communities. And I think this is squarely on them. And they should move fast to come up with recommendations about what we can do. But of course, in Parliament, there are different committees that can look at this thing. In fact, you talk like you've seen, I've drafted something. For example, there are health issues here. There are social welfare issues here, which is why we had to go and alleviate the plight of the elderly. But they can't walk to town to buy bread. That's why we had to make donations in Nkulumane. Kule social welfare, kule education, kule transport. This is a problem which is multidimensional. And I think most committees, even a committee, a finance, everyone will have to grapple with it. Maybe we need to come up with a super committee, a select committee to look at this episode. But you know this episode is not the first. Election, where the model that the president preferred was to set up the Motlanthe Commission. For consistency, is he going to set up the Motlanthe Commission now? Or is he merely going to implement the recommendations of the Motlanthe Commission? But certainly as Parliament, we also ought to do something. And I would think we need to come up with some super committee to look at the numerous issues that arise from what happened. But the sad thing is that we can refer to those events as events that happened, that have happened, that are behind us. But they are continuing. Ngoba usesibhedlela recover. Omunye, who is traumatized, is displaced, kulama displacements. Ngoba nxa ama-soldiers angena ezindlini lamapolisa betshaya abantu. Silabantu aba-displaced, silabantu aba-traumatized. Silabantu abangasela source of income. We've got a myriad of problems that face us as members of Parliament. And certainly we need to move quickly to come up with some mechanism to help our people.
Yeah, we still have a lot to do as citizens when it comes to following up on our members of Parliament, on our councillors, because it is our duty to hold them accountable. One thing that I've noticed is that many people really are not clear or don't know the role of a parliamentarian, the role of a councillor. MPs are not just there to promise roads and attend funerals. Their duty is legislative. They are supposed to be, introducing in Parliament laws that help make our lives better, protect our children, and they're also supposed to hold government accountable by using the existing committees that are there to investigate government deals, tenders, and many other things that might not be quite clear. And sometimes we see less of the legislative role that the MPs play, especially when it comes to campaigning, because people will be promising things that they don't have the capacity to do or to deliver, because they are not ministers. They are not in government, and most of the times they don't have the capacity to bring the development that they talk about. But this is what we always hear when it's election time. And like I've been saying, we would like to hear from you, and we want to hear what your MP has done for you. Are you happy with the performance of your MP? Are you going to be voting him back or her back into Parliament, or you now want to change and put a new face? All those things, you can contact us on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and our Twitter page. We also have a WhatsApp number, and talk to us and give us feedback on these issues that we discuss on this program. My name is Zenzele Ndebele. Till we meet again in other programs, have a good day.